Essentially, a vector file is a collection of shapes and paths that layer and interact to create images. As such, the way that the file is created can greatly affect its performance in a program like VideoScribe, which relies on those shapes and paths to know where to draw its lines. For more information about a vector image versus a bitmap image like a JPEG or PNG, you should watch the Adding Images to Your Project video in the main VideoScribe tutorial set. Sometimes, when you add a vector image to VideoScribe, it will draw out exactly like you want it to, especially if it was a vector made specifically for use in VideoScribe. However, if you want to use files from other sources like websites such as publicdomainvectors.org or stock image websites like Shutterstock, there are a couple of things you need to do if you want it to look even halfway decent in VideoScribe. Here's an example of what it would look like if you simply took a vector file and imported it straight into VideoScribe. Well, that was exciting. Now here's an example of the same image, but after we fix it up a little in Inkscape. It's not perfect, but it's better than the original version, and it only takes a couple of minutes to do once you get used to it, so I think it's worth learning. In this tutorial, we'll be using Inkscape, a free vector graphics program that is available for Windows, Macs, and Linux. It's a fine alternative to Illustrator, and it will do what we need it to do so we can use our images in VideoScribe. So go to inkscape.org, download and install Inkscape, and we can begin. First, download the vector file that you want to use to your computer. I'll use this suitcase image that I got from publicdomainvectors.org. I'll put a link to both the before and after SVG files in the download section so you can compare them yourself. Let's open up Inkscape. When you open Inkscape, it will automatically create a new document. Go to File, Import, and navigate to the suitcase original SVG file. Next, click on Layers, Layers from the top menu. This will pop up the Layers window. Right-click on the Layer 1 layer and select Duplicate Current Layer. We now have two instances of our suitcase. Rename the Layer 1 copy layer that was created to Image. Rename the Layer 1 layer to Stroke. Now we have two copies of the same image directly on top of each other. Hide the image layer by going to the Layers window and clicking on the eyeball icon next to the image layer. It would look like nothing's changed since the stroke layer was just a duplicate image. Next, click on the suitcase and go to Object, Fill and Stroke from the top menu. A new Fill and Stroke window will show up at the top right of your screen and the Layers window will be pushed under it. Switch to the Stroke Paint tab in the Fill and Stroke window and click on the flat color icon. Switch to the Stroke Style tab in the Fill and Stroke window and set it to pixels in the drop-down options and set its width to 20 for now. Our image now has a black stroke around most of it. We want to cover as much of the main outline of our object as possible. You can see that we have a couple of color points leaking through, so try setting the width to 40 instead. Now the main outline is filled in completely, and the shapes are pretty filled in too, which is good. Wherever you see color, VideoScribe won't draw over and will simply show it at the end of the drawing animation. For example, here's what the drawing animation would look like if we left the stroke at 20 pixels. If we pause it while it's drawing, you can see an unnatural section of color missing from the handle and little pieces of color missing from the corners and other parts of the image, which is automatically filled once the animation ends. However, if we look at the drawing animation with a stroke of 40 pixels, you can see that the handle was drawn completely, the corners are filled, and there are less pockets of color missing inside of the different objects. That's why it's best to try to get the stroke to fill as much of the main outline as possible. Once you've set your stroke, go to the Layers window and set the stroke layer's opacity to 0. The entire image will disappear. It's still there, it's just completely transparent. The stroke layer is simply the data layer to tell VideoScribe where and how to draw its lines, as we saw in this sample. Finally, turn the image layer back on by clicking on its eyeball icon in the Layers window. It should look exactly like it looked when we first opened it. The only difference now is that it has stroke data that VideoScribe can use to draw it. Click and drag to select the entire image and go to File, Document Properties. Under Custom Size, click on the Resize Page to Drawing or Selection button. The canvas is now resized directly around our image. Close out of this window and go to File, Save As. First, select Inkscape SVG from the File Type drop-down menu. Rename the file and put Inkscape somewhere in its file name. This file is only for when you want to change the stroke or something in Inkscape. It will retain the layers we created so you don't have to do it all over again. I'll call it Suitcase 40 Pixels Inkscape.svg and click Save. Next, go to File, Save As, and click on the drop-down menu to select Plain SVG. This is the file that you'd import into VideoScribe. So like the Inkscape SVG, I suggest that you add the word VideoScribe somewhere in its file name so you know that it's already formatted. I'll call it Suitcase 40 Pixels VideoScribe.svg and click Save. To test it out, open VideoScribe and click on the image icon. Click on the file folder icon to import your own image and find the VideoScribe version of the vector we just created. Resize it, set the camera, set the draw time, and preview it. And that's it! The process really only takes a couple of minutes once you get the hang of it, and it will open up so many options as to where to get your images from. Definitely check out the Ultimate Public Domain Image Guide on my website, videohelp.org, to find a ton of free places to get both photos and vector images that you can use in your videos. The process to do this in Adobe Illustrator is pretty much the same and is also included in this course. However, I feel like Illustrator is more stable of a program since Inkscape crashed several times as I was trying to figure out the best way to do this technique. Well, I hope that this video was helpful. Leave any questions or comments below, and I'll see you in the next video. This is Luke signing off. Thanks for watching.